Blake and Henry knew each other since they were kids. Blake was a son of a humble farmer and got used to hard labor at a very young age, while Henry was raised with a comfortable lifestyle as a son of a renowned mogul who owned several properties and businesses. Despite of their differences in status, Blake and Henry became good friends and stuck together until they were full-grown adults. They shared similar interests and even fell in love with the same girl. Unfortunately, their friendship was eventually tarnished by jealousy and envy, and these had resulted into an inhumane act of unimaginable horror. Blake became a farmer like his old man and lived a very frugal lifestyle. On the other hand, Henry received a hefty capital from his father, which gave him a good opportunity to strive on his own. Henry bought a huge property in the countryside and started a farming business with a piggery and other livestock. With Blake's extensive knowledge in this field, he guided Henry's business and told him everything he needed to know. As a token of appreciation and for their long-lasting friendship, Henry loaned a piece of land to Blake where he built a simple home and also planted some produce of his own. Blake was very grateful for his wealthy friend's generosity, and he was in debt to him because of it. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out well for Henry. Despite of Blake's guidance, he was spending more money than he was earning. His profit could not keep up with his luxurious lifestyle, and his situation got even worse when he became addicted to gambling. He used all of his revenue to pay for his losses instead of growing his business. He started relieving his employees and eventually cut some corners, which affected the quality of his goods. The numbers of bulk orders from restaurants and other establishments had decreased. It didn't matter how much produce he could make if there were no customers to sell them to. Meanwhile, Blake was steadily profiting from his harvest, despite of doing everything on his own. Henry did not want to reach out to his father for help, in fear that he would be seen as a failure. Instead, he asked his friend to start paying a rent for the land that he loaned him. Blake complied without any complaints. At that point, Henry was starting to envy Blake's accomplishments, despite of what little he had compared to him. Their friendship began to wane because of Henry's personal issues, and it finally hit the bottom when Mary came to the picture. Mary was a owner of a small diner, and she met Blake and Henry when she was looking for a supplier of vegetables. These two men competed against each other to win over this client, but the competition went further than that. As two single and independent men trying to pave their paths for their future, they were both interested in having a wife. Mary ended up making a deal with Henry since he had a wider variety of produce. However, the man who won over her heart was the humble farmer. They dated for a few months and decided to marry a year after. Henry acted like a gentleman and even sponsored their marriage as a gift for the couple. Unfortunately, it was already too late when Blake realized that his childhood friend was gravely resentful towards him. His pent-up jealousy had driven him to commit such a heinous crime, and it was just the beginning of his horrifying acts. A few months after Mary moved into the farm to live with Blake, she suddenly disappeared. It all happened during a seemingly typical day at the farm. Blake was taking care of his crops as Mary went to the town to open her diner. They kissed goodbye while deciding what they would have for dinner later. Sadly, that dinner never happened since she never came back home. When the skies went dark and Mary was still nowhere to be seen, Blake got worried and decided to visit his wife's establishment. He kept on calling her phone, but it was turned off for some reason. Upon his arrival, he saw that the tarps were down and the windows were closed. Mary went out very early in the morning like how she usually did, but the diner did not open that day. Blake checked the back door, which led him to the kitchen, and he discovered that it was left unlocked. Her shelves were fully stocked, but they were all untouched. Blake asked around the neighborhood if any of them had seen his wife, but none of them did. However, he already had an idea who might have seen her. When he saw the fresh vegetables in the kitchen, Blake suspected that Henry came that day to drop his produce. Blake rushed to Henry's farm and asked him if he delivered supplies to Mary. Henry claimed that he already delivered her orders 2 days ago and had no reason to go back there so soon. He also showed him the receipt of his wife's order with her signature, which was indeed dated 2 days ago. With this evidence, it seemed that he was telling the truth. As a friend, Blake trusted Henry and told him that Mary was missing. Henry offered his help and they looked for Mary until dawn. Unfortunately, they couldn't find her anywhere. They reported her missing on the following day, but all their efforts were futile. All the while they were searching for his wife, Blake couldn't shake off the feeling that his friend Henry was hiding something. Despite of his credible alibi, his flustered face and tense behavior suggested otherwise. After a couple of days, he went back to Mary's diner again and rechecked the stock in the kitchen. Among the vegetables on the shelf, some of the products were beginning to age while a few of them were still fine. It was then when he realized that the stocks were not delivered at the same time. Mary would have signed the receipt even if the order was incomplete, since Henry was already her regular supplier and trusted him. He came back to the diner on the day when she went missing in order to deliver the remaining items. Since he often delivered very early in the morning, nobody but Mary would have seen him. Blake went to the authorities once again and made a request to investigate Henry, but his request was denied. Aside from the lack of solid evidence, Henry was a son of an influential man who contributed a lot of things to the community. Charity was rare for this town, and they did not want to tarnish their relationship with one of the most generous donors. Meanwhile, Henry was praised by a local restaurant for delivering the highest quality of pork that they ever had. Words began to spread, and he gained several new clients within a short amount of time. They asked him what the secret was behind the meat, but he would arrogantly state that it was a secret of the trade. However, there was another reason why Henry did not want to disclose this information. He believed that the meat got better because of what he fed to the pigs. After a couple of days, another person from the town was reported missing. While things were going great for Henry, his farmer friend was at his lowest low ever since he lost his wife. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, he was not the only person in despair for a missing loved one. A month after Mary went missing, more people just suddenly disappeared without a trace. At the same time, Henry's business was steadily flourishing because his pigs were in high demand. Without any support from the local authority, Blake disregarded everything else and decided to do his own investigation. He followed Henry wherever he went, and it was then when he was able to uncover the sickening secret behind Henry's trade. On one rainy night, Blake saw Henry's truck parked under the shadows of a tree with the headlights turned off. This less traveled path was very far from the main roads, and only the locals would know about this route. Blake quietly observed from afar. Nothing much was happening until a young woman came passing by. All of a sudden, Henry came out running from his truck and hit the woman on the head with a lug wrench. She was caught completely off guard and was instantly knocked unconscious. Blake wanted to help the woman, but he needed to see what Henry was planning to do with her. He thought that he might discover what happened to his wife and the other people who went missing, and he was right. Henry bound the woman's arms and legs, and then he dragged her back to his truck and drove away. Blake followed him while keeping a safe distance until they got back to Henry's farmhouse. He contacted the authorities immediately after his arrival, and he bravely snuck inside to make sure that nothing else would happen to the poor woman who was kidnapped. Henry dragged the unconscious victim inside his kitchen, and the horrifying truth was finally revealed to Blake when he saw what was inside. On the top of his butcher's table was an amputated leg of a person. Henry casually grabbed it and placed it on a meat grinder. He laid his new victim on the table where cuffs and chains were already prepared on each side. It was clear that it was not the first time that he did this horrifying crime. The woman finally regained consciousness, but she was already shackled. Henry covered her mouth with a tape when she screamed. As he was about to undress the poor woman to prepare her for butchering, the pigs on his farm started groaning. The pigs were reacting to the sound of the meat grinder as if they knew that it was time to eat. Henry grabbed the bowl of ground human meat and stepped out of the kitchen to tend to his noisy grunters, and Blake took this opportunity to help the poor lady. His tears began to shed as he realized what might have happened to his wife, but he tried to compose himself in order to get out of there alive. Unfortunately, the woman's arms and legs were handcuffed on each side of the table, and he needed the keys in order to free her. He did everything he could to remove the shackles until he noticed that it suddenly became quiet. The grunting of the pigs had ceased, and Henry was standing at the door while glaring at him. Blake immediately grabbed a knife from the table. He swung it back and forth as Henry walked towards him. With his wild swings, he was able to cut Henry's right arm, which deeply infuriated him. Henry grabbed a meat hook from the hanging bar over the table and belligerently lunged forward. He pierced the hook right on the back of Blake's shoulder, but Henry also stabbed him on the side of his body. Blake screamed in pain while Henry fell on the floor. Fortunately, the officers finally showed up before things got worse. The woman was saved while Blake and Henry were sent to the hospital. Henry admitted to his crimes after he was discharged at the hospital, and his horrifying acts had affected the victims in more ways than they were expecting. His first victim was Blake's wife, Mary. He claimed that he did not intend to kill her, but jealousy and envy got the better of him when she refused to go out with him. She took her by force, and she fought back with all she had until she slipped and snapped her neck at the side of his truck. In order to hide what happened, Henry minced her body and fed her to the pigs. These batch of pigs were the ones who went to the first restaurant who praised him for its outstanding quality. Because of this unprecedented outcome, Henry decided to keep feeding them human meat. Including Mary, Henry slaughtered 6 victims in total. They were all fed to the pigs, which were then served to multiple restaurants all over the town.